Don't decorate. Dad's tired. The text read, but I walked into a silent lake house perfectly staged for a 60th birthday, missing only the family. My father-in-law sat alone, showing me a video of my husband holding a woman in red on a rooftop miles away. Tonight is the public funeral for Logan's reputation, Richard said. I dropped my bags and slipped my wedding ring into my pocket. Let's get started. My name is Tessa Caldwell, and at 30,000 T, the only thing keeping my anxiety at bay was the rhythmic clatter of my keyboard. The cabin was dark, illuminated only by the soft blue glow of my laptop screen, where I was obsessively rearranging slides for a pitch deck. This was not just any marketing strategy. This was the rebranding proposal for a massive new acquisition by Harbaughstone Equity Group, my husband's family company. Logan had promised me that if I nailed this presentation, he would finally showcase my work to his father during the birthday weekend. Make it pop, Tess, Logan had said before he left for his business prep trip 3 days ago. Dad is turning 60. He is thinking about legacy. Show him we are the future. I adjusted a font size, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted to walk into that lake house in Harbor Falls and finally feel like a partner, not just the decorative wife Logan had married 5 years ago. I checked my phone again as the pilot announced our initial descent. The texts from Logan were sitting there glowing with a strange sort of dissonance. Don't stress about the decorations. He had written 4 hours ago. Keep it low-key. Dad is tired. Just bring the cake and your beautiful self. It was sweet theoretically, but it was also odd. Logan was a man of spectacle. He was the kind of man who rented out entire vineyards for a Tuesday date night if he felt guilty about missing dinner the week before. For his father's 60th milestone, Loki felt like a foreign language. I scrolled up, remember to bring a jacket. It is just a small outdoor thing. I frowned. A small outdoor thing in late October in the Midwest. I typed back a question about the guest list, asking if I should bring the expensive scotch I had bought for his uncle. He had left it on red. When the plane landed, the dread started to settle in my stomach like a cold stone. I collected my luggage and navigated the sterile, bright corridors of the airport, fighting the urge to call him again. He was probably busy. He was probably setting things up. I took a rental car to the lake house. Harbor Falls was quiet. The kind of wealthy silence that costs millions of dollars to maintain. The Mercer estate sat at the end of a winding private drive, flanked by towering oaks that were shedding their leaves in violent shades of red and gold. As I pulled up the gravel driveway, my headlights swept across the lawn, and I slammed on the brakes. Logan had lied. This was not a small low-key gathering. The entire front lawn was transformed. White tents peaked like snowy mountains against the night sky. Catering vans with the logo of the most exclusive culinary service in Chicago were parked in a neat row. There were heat lamps, velvet ropes, and a massive archway made of silver and gold balloons that spelled out, "Cheers to 60 years." It was spectacular. It was expensive. It was also completely empty. I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching loudly under my boots. The silence was heavy, unnatural. Where were the caterers? Where was the music? Where was Caroline, my mother-in-law, who usually hovered over event planners like a hawk? "Logan," I called out. My voice died in the crisp air. I dragged my suitcase up the stone steps. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open, expecting a chorus of surprise or the hum of preparation. Instead, the foyer was dark. I walked through the hallway, past the portraits of Logan and his ancestors, into the main dining room that overlooked the lake. The long mahogany table, usually set for 20, was bare except for one spot at the very head. Richard Mercer sat there. He was wearing a faded cardigan and reading glasses, looking nothing like the titan of industry I was terrified of impressing. He looked old. He looked defeated. In front of him sat a small, sad grocery store cake with the numbers 6 and 0 stuck into the frosting. They were leaning sideways, dripping blue wax onto the white icing. He did not look up as I entered. He just stared at the unlit candles. "Richard," I whispered. He slowly raised his head. His eyes, usually sharp and critical, were bloodshot. "Tesser," he said. His voice was dry, like rust scraping against metal. You are early, or maybe you are late. I cannot tell anymore. Where is everyone? I asked, leaving my suitcase by the door. The tents outside, the balloons. Where is Logan? Where is Caroline? Richard laughed, a short barking sound devoid of humor. The party is tomorrow, Tesser. Tonight was supposed to be the family dinner, just us. But apparently the definition of family has been revised. He reached into the pocket of his cardigan and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the polished wood of the table. It stopped inches from my hand. Open it, he commanded. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It was the official invitation for the gala tomorrow night. I had seen the digital drafts, but I had never seen the final print. The Mercer family cordially invites you to celebrate the 60th birthday of Richard Mercer, hosted by Logan Mercer. And I stopped. The air left my lungs. It did not say Tesser Caldwell. It did not say his wife. It said hosted by Logan Mercer and Sloane Hart. And below that, in smaller text under the section for special guests, was my name. MS. Tesser Caldwell. I stared at the paper. Who is Sloane Hart? Flipped it over, Richard said. I turned the card over. There was nothing there. No, Richard said, gesturing to his phone, which was lying face down on the table. Not the card, the phone. As if on cue, the phone buzzed. A notification lit up the screen. It was a live stream alert. Logan Mercer is live. Pre-game for the big weekend. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I reached out and tapped the screen. The video filled the display. The camera angle was high, shaky, capturing the glittering skyline of a city that was definitely not Harbor Falls. It looked like New York. There was loud house music thumping in the background, the sound of popping corks and laughter. And there was Logan, my husband, the man who had kissed me goodbye 3 days ago and told me he loved me. He was wearing the velvet tuxedo jacket I had bought him for our anniversary. He looked radiant, flushed with expensive champagne and adrenaline. What is up, everyone? Logan shouted over the music, grinning at the camera. We are 24 hours away from the Big Six bash for the old man, but we had to start the party early here in the city. He swung the camera around, and his arm tightened around the waist of a woman. She was stunning. Dark hair, olive skin, wearing a red dress that looked like it cost more than my car. She laughed, throwing her head back, her hand resting possessively on his chest. Say hi, Sloane. Logan yelled. Hi, she squealed, waving her champagne flute. Logan pulled her closer, kissing her temple. He looked into the camera lens, his eyes shining with a terrifying sort of honesty. I just want to say this weekend is going to be legendary. And I could not do it without this one right here. My ride or die. The person who makes me daring enough to live my truth. Cheers to the future. Baby. The caption scrolled across the bottom. Birthday weekend with my favorite person. New chapter Sloane Hart. He did not mention me. He did not mention his father sitting alone in a silent house 2 states away. The live stream ended. The screen went black, reflecting my own pale, horrified face. For a moment, I could not move. My brain was trying to process the information, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe it was a PR stunt. But the way he held her, the way he looked at her, that was not PR. That was intimacy. I grabbed my phone and dialed Logan. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. Hey, you have reached Logan. I am crushing it right now. Leave a message. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking so hard, I almost dropped it. Richard sighed. He reached for a crystal decanter on the sideboard behind him and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. He pushed one toward me. Drink, he said. He is cheating on me, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. He is with her publicly. You thought you were the first person he lied to? Richard asked, taking a slow sip of his whiskey. I looked at my father-in-law. What do you mean? He called me 2 hours ago. Richard said, he told me you were stuck in the city. Said you had a crisis with a client. He said you were too emotional to handle the pressure of the party planning, so he hired Sloane to help. He told the rest of the family, you might not even make it until Sunday. I never said that, I protested, my voice rising. I have been working on his presentation. I flew in early to help set up. I know, Richard said calmly, but that is the narrative. Tesser, to the world, you are the workaholic, absent wife who does not care about her family. And Sloane, she is the savior, the strategic partner. She is going to be standing next to him on that stage tomorrow night when he announces the new company direction. My mind raced back to the last 5 years. The way Logan had slowly isolated me, the way he encouraged me to work from home, the way he managed our finances. Trust me, babe, I have got the boring stuff handled. I looked at the invitation again, hosted by Logan Mercer and Sloane Hart. This was not just an affair. This was a replacement. He was erasing me. He was overwriting our entire life together with a new font and a new face. And he was doing it on the biggest stage of the year. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. I wiped it away furiously. I looked at the pathetic little Kate. I looked at the banners outside that screamed celebration while the house screamed betrayal. Richard watched me. His eyes were tired, but underneath the exhaustion, I saw a spark of something else. Anger. Cold. Hard anger. He thinks I am a senile old man who will sign whatever he puts in front of me. Richard said he thinks you are a doormat who will cry in the bathroom and sign a quiet divorce settlement to avoid a scene. He leaned forward, the shadows of the room deepening the lines on his face. Tonight I will decide, Richard said, and you decide. Do you want to continue to be the background decoration for his life? Do you want to be the invisible wife who fades away? He took another sip of whiskey and set the glass down with a sharp clink. Or, he said, do you want to stand on my side, the side of the truth? I looked at the video on the phone again. I looked at the invitation that had stripped me of my title. I reached into my pocket, and my fingers brushed against the cold metal of my wedding band. I realized then that the flight home had not been a return trip. It had been an evacuation. I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive cedar and betrayal filling my lungs. Background decoration is not really my style, I said. Richard nodded slowly. Good, because tomorrow is not going to be a birthday party. It is going to be an execution of character, and we have a lot of work to do. I sat there in the dim light of the dining room, the amber liquid in my glass trembling slightly as I held it. The silence of the house felt heavy, pressing in on us. But the noise in my head was deafening. It was a chaotic rewind of the last 5 years. A film reel spinning backward, recontextualizing every memory I held dear. How did I not see it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I am smart, Richard. I run a business. I manage crisis communications for brands. How did I let him do this to me? Richard swirled his drink, the ice clinking softly. Because you were not looking for a predator, Tesser. You were looking for a partner. And Logan is very good at playing the role of the perfect man until the moment he decides he does not need you anymore. He was right. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me, no longer viewed through the rose-gold lens of love, but under the harsh clinical light of scrutiny. 5 years ago, I was Tesser Caldwell, a rising star in brand identity, with a wait list of clients in a studio apartment I had paid for with my own grit. Then came Logan Mercer. He was different from the guys I usually dated. He did not try to compete with me. He listened. He sat across from me at dinner, his chin resting on his hand, asking detailed questions about font theory and color psychology, as if I were explaining the secrets of the universe. He made me feel seen. You are working too hard. He had told me 6 months after the wedding. We were lying in bed on a Sunday morning. Why are you paying $3,000 a month for that office downtown? We have the guest wing here. Convert the sunroom. It has better light and you save the overhead. It sounded so logical. It sounded like he was looking out for my bottom line. So I closed my office. I moved my life into the Mercer house. I thought I was optimizing my business, but in reality, I was shrinking my world down to a size that fit inside his pocket. And these clients, he would say, scanning a contract I was about to sign. This guy Miller, I know his type. He is not hiring you for your design skills tests. He is hiring you because he wants to get you a drink. Do you really want to put yourself in that position? You are better than that. Slowly, systematically, the male clients disappeared. Then the clients who required travel disappeared. Then the friends who asked too many questions about why I was never free for happy hours stopped calling. Logan filled the void with his own demands. He became my calendar manager, my financial advisor, my entire social circle. "I am just looking out for us," he would say whenever I pushed back. "We are building an empire, babe. We need to be streamlined." I remembered a night 2 years ago. I had been looking for a photo on his iPad and stumbled across a thread of messages with a contact named S. They were not explicit, but they were intimate. Inside jokes, complaints about his day that he had not shared with me, emojis that were too friendly. I had confronted him, my heart pounding in my throat. Logan had not apologized. He had not panicked. He had looked at me with a mix of disappointment and pity that made my stomach churn. "Are you serious, Tesser?" he had asked, tossing the iPad onto the sofa. "That is Sloan. She is a consultant for the acquisition deal. I am up until 2 in the morning trying to secure our future, trying to close a deal worth $50 million, and you are spying on me. You are reading into emojis." He had paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "How am I supposed to focus on providing for this family when I have to worry about my wife acting like a jealous teenager? You are sabotaging me, Tesser." By the end of the hour, I was the one crying. I was the one apologizing for being insecure, for adding stress to his life. "I promise to do better. I promise to trust him." "Trust," Richard said, snapping me back to the present. He was watching me closely, as if reading the flashbacks on my face. "That is his favorite word, isn't it?" He refused to sign a contract for the joint venture, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Last year, I wanted to formalize the branding agency as a subsidiary of Harbaugh Stone. I had the papers drawn up. He threw them in the trash. He said, 'Marriage is the ultimate contract. If we bring lawyers into our bed, we are already divorced.'" "Add the money?" Richard asked. "He moved our savings," I said, my stomach twisting. "About $200,000. My savings from before the marriage and everything we saved since. He moved it to a holding account 3 months ago. He said it was for tax optimization. He said if we kept it liquid in the joint checking, we would get hit with capital gains penalties." Richard let out a low, bitter chuckle. "Tax optimization. That is rich." He stood up, his movement slower than I remembered, and walked over to the heavy oak desk in the corner of the room. He pulled out a key from his pocket, unlocked the bottom drawer, and withdrew a thick file folder. "My wife, Caroline, used to say the exact same things," Richard said, placing the folder on the table between us. "She would tell me I was too focused on the legalities, that I did not trust her vision. She made me feel small for wanting to protect the assets I built." He opened the folder. It was a collection of legal documents, some dating back 20 years, some as recent as last month. "I paid the price for not making her sign a prenup," Richard said softly. "And I paid the price for letting her manipulate me into giving Logan a seat at the table before he earned it. But look at this." He slid a document toward me. It was a power of attorney form dated 6 months ago. "I remember this," I said, frowning. "This was right after your heart surgery. You were in the ICU. Logan said he needed emergency authorization to handle payroll for the company because you were incapacitated." "I was under heavy sedation," Richard said, his voice hardening. "I vaguely remember him coming into the recovery room. He told me it was a standard form for the insurance company. He held the pen for me. Tesser." He guided my hand. I looked at the signature. It was shaky, barely legible, a scroll of a man who was half conscious. That document, Richard pointed a trembling finger at the paper, gave him full control over my personal investment accounts. It gave him the power to liquidate assets to cover medical expenses, but my insurance covers everything. He did not use it for medical bills. He flipped the page to show a bank statement. "Transfer out $300,000 to an LLC registered in the Caymans. Transfer out $150,000 to a luxury real estate development firm in Florida." I stared at the numbers. This was not just ambition. This was theft. He was stealing from his dying father. "He is leveraging you," Richard said, his eyes locking onto mine. "He used your talent to build the brand image of his companies for free. He isolated you so you would have no support system when he decided to discard you. And he used my illness to siphon off the liquidity he needed to fund his new life with that woman." I thought about the video again. My ride or die. It is a pattern, I whispered. It is not just cheating. It is a business model. He finds a host. He extracts everything he can. Money, credibility, energy, and when the host runs dry, he moves on. Exactly. Richard said. He is a parasite in a designer's suit. I looked down at my hands. They were bare. The ring was in my pocket, a heavy weight against my thigh. For 5 years, I had believed I was part of a team. I believed we were building a life. But I was just an employee who slept in the boss's bed, working for zero salary and no benefits, waiting to be laid off. A cold, hard clarity settled over me. The tears stopped. The grief was still there, buried deep. But on the surface, something else was taking over. It was the part of me that Logan had tried to suppress, the strategist. The woman who could turn a PR disaster into a triumph. The woman who built a business from nothing. He thinks you are weak, I said to Richard. He thinks you are a tired old man who just wants to eat cake and go to sleep. And he thinks you are a fragile, emotional artist who is currently crying in a hotel room because he missed your call. Richard added, I reached out and picked up the power of attorney document. I read the fine print. I looked at the dates. He made a mistake, I said. He got arrogant. He left a paper trail. He did, Richard agreed. But he assumes no one is looking at it. He assumes I trust him too much to check the statements and that you are too in love to ask questions. Caroline, I said suddenly, does she know? Richard's face tightened. Caroline sees what she wants to see. As long as the checks are clear and her social standing is intact, she will let Logan do whatever he wants. She is not a victim, Tesser. She is an accomplice by negligence. I nodded. That made sense. The silence of the house, the lack of warning. Caroline knew something was happening, and she had chosen her son over the truth. Okay, I said. I pushed the glass of whiskey away. I needed to be sharp. So, tomorrow he is expecting a party. He is expecting to walk in here with Sloane, dazzle the crowd, announce his new venture, and sideline us both. That is the plan. Richard said, he wants to use your 60th birthday to launch his future. I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots of the presentation I had been working on. The pitch deck he had me build. It is all about the new generation of Harbaugh Stone. He is going to announce he is taking over completely, isn't he? He intends to force me into retirement publicly. Richard said, if he announces it in front of the board, the investors, and the press, and I just sit there smiling like a frail old invalid, it becomes a done deal. The stock market loves a succession plan. He wants a coronation, I said. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the white tents glowed faintly in the moonlight, ghostly and waiting. The stage was set for Logan's triumph. He had the script. He had the cast and he had the audience. But he had forgotten one thing. He had left the two people who knew his script best alone in a room together with a bottle of whiskey and a box of evidence. I turned back to Richard. He wants a show, I said, a dangerous calm settling in my voice. Let's give him one, but I think we need to rewrite the ending. Richard smiled, a grim shark-like expression that reminded me exactly how he had built a fortune before Logan was even born. I was hoping you would say that, he said. Now dry your eyes. We have contracts to review. Richard pushed a leather-bound medical folio across the heavy oak desk. It slid over the polished surface and came to rest under the glow of the library lamp. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. After the financial records and the invitation, I was not sure how much more betrayal I could process in one sitting, but Richard waited with a patience that unnerved me. I flipped open the cover. The header reads St. Jude Medical Center, Cardiology Department. The date on the summary was from only 2 weeks ago. Read the prognosis, Richard said, his voice steady. I scanned the dense medical jargon until I found the summary in plain English. The patient exhibits moderate mitral valve regurgitation. The condition is stable with medication. Surgical intervention recommended within 1 or 2 years. Life expectancy is normal with proper management. I looked up at him confused. 1 or 2 years, stable. Logan told me you were in heart failure. He told me the doctors said you might not make it to Christmas. That is why we rushed to this party. That is why he has been pushing the investors to close the acquisition deal this week. He calls it preparing for the inevitable. Richard said dryly. I call it marketing. I looked back at the file. This was a man with a manageable condition, not a man on his deathbed. Caroline and Logan have been telling everyone that I am too weak to travel. Richard continued. They tell the board members that my mind is slipping, that the medication makes me foggy. They use my frailty as a tool to solicit pity capital. Investors love a tragedy. Tesser, they love the narrative of the devoted son stepping up to carry the torch for his dying father. It makes Logan look noble. It makes him look stable. He reached for his tablet and unlocked it, tapping furiously on the screen before handing it to me. And look at this. This was sent to the venture capital group in Chicago yesterday. It was a PDF of the pitch deck Logan was planning to present. I scrolled through the familiar slides, the growth projections, the market analysis, until I hit a slide I had never designed. It was titled Internal Capabilities, and there in the center of the screen was the logo of my agency Prism Branding. Underneath it, the text read Wholly Owned In-House Creative Division, led by Tesser Mercer. He listed my company as an asset of Harbaugh Stone. I said, the anger rising in my throat like bile. He told them he owns my agency. He told them I work for him. He is selling you as part of the package. Richard said he did not just steal your money, Tesser. He stole your professional identity. He is using your portfolio to boost the valuation of his deal, all while planning to replace you socially with that woman in the red dress. My hands gripped the edges of the tablet. I had built Prism from nothing. I had worked 18-hour days. I had eaten ramen in a studio apartment while Logan was ordering room service on his father's credit card, and he had simply absorbed it, erased my autonomy with a single slide in a PowerPoint presentation. There is more, Richard said. He stood up and walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a portrait of his late father. His movements were stiff. Yes, but they were not the movements of an invalid. He spun the dial with precision, the tumblers clicking loudly in the quiet room. He pulled out a stack of bank statements that were stapled together with bright red warning flags. This is the Mercer Family Medical Trust, Richard explained, placing the stack in front of me. It was set up 10 years ago to ensure that if I ever needed long-term care, the money would be there. It is supposed to be untouchable, restricted access only for doctors. Recipient, Azure Coast Real Estate Holdings. October 1st, $75,000. Recipient, Lux Automotive Imports. He is draining your medical fund, I said, horrified. He is gambling with your life insurance. He is using the power of attorney he forced me to sign. Richard said he lists these as authorized quality of life expenditures. Apparently, a speculative crypto investment is essential for my heart condition. Richard sat back down, and for the first time, the mask of the stern patriarch slipped completely. He looked tired, but not in the way Logan described. He looked like a man who was grieving the loss of a son who was still alive. Here is the twist, Tesser, Richard said softly. I found out about the first withdrawal 3 months ago. I could have stopped him then. I could have called the lawyers, but I did not. Why not? I asked. Because I wanted to see how far he would go, Richard admitted. So I started acting the part. I started shuffling when I walked. I started pretending to forget names. I let my hands shake when I held a cup of tea. I wanted to see if my son would try to help me or if he would accelerate the looting. And I asked, though I already knew the answer. He stopped coming for Sunday dinners. Richard said he stopped asking how I was feeling. He only showed up when he needed a signature or when he needed to take a selfie of him holding my hand to post on LinkedIn with a caption about cherishing every moment. As soon as the camera was off, he would check his watch and leave. I became a prop to him. Tesser, a dying prop. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Logan was not just greedy. He was devoid of empathy. He was performing grief for an audience while actively stealing the safety net of the man he was grieving. I needed to know everything, Richard said. So I did what I should have done years ago. I hired a professional. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out a plain manila envelope. It was thick. He slid it across the table. I had him followed, Richard said. My investigator tracked him for the last 6 weeks. While he told you he was in Seattle for the tech conference, he was in Carbo. I opened the envelope. Photographs spilled out onto the desk, glossy and sharp. There was Logan wearing swim trunks, laughing as he carried Sloane on his back through the surf. There was Logan feeding her a strawberry at a poolside cabana. There was Logan kissing her in the lobby of a five-star resort. But it was the document clipped to the back of the photos that made the room spin. It was a copy of a hotel folio from the Aspiranza Resort. Guest name Mr. and Mrs. Logan Mercer. I stared at the name Mrs. Logan Mercer. She is using my name, I whispered. She is checking in under your identity. Richard corrected me. It keeps the credit card charges from looking suspicious if anyone glances at the statement. But it is more than that. Look at the date. I looked. It was our anniversary weekend. The weekend, Logan told me he had to work on a crisis merger in London. He had sent me flowers and a diamond bracelet with a note that said, "Wish I was there." He was there. He was just with someone else, letting her play the role of his wife, letting her sleep in the bed booked under my name. He is auditioning her. I realized, my voice shaking. He is doing a dry run of his life with her, using my name as a placeholder until he can legally swap us out. Richard leaned forward, his eyes intense. And that brings us to tomorrow night, the party, the big reveal. He is going to introduce her to the board members. He is going to introduce her to the mayor. He is going to let people assume she is the new power behind the throne. And if you are standing there smiling and handing out cake, do you know what you become? He did not wait for me to answer. You become the pitiable ex-wife, Richard said brutally. The woman who is too stupid to know she has already been replaced. The woman who arranges the flowers for her husband's mistress. I felt a cold fire ignite in my chest. It burned away the shock. It burned away the sadness. All that was left was a sharp diamond-hard clarity. He wants to humiliate me, I said. He wants to take my company, take my money, take my dignity, and leave me with nothing but a settlement check that he will probably try to fight in court. He thinks he has already won, Richard said. He thinks I am dying and you are clueless. He has no idea that we are sitting in this room right now. Richard extended his hand. It was steady. I have a proposition for you, Tesser. He said, you have the skills. You know where the bodies are buried. You know his passwords, his schedule, his lies. I have the leverage. I own the company. I own the trust. He paused, his gaze unwavering. Help me document everything. Organize the evidence. Build a case that not even his high-priced lawyers can dismantle. Help me turn this birthday party into a courtroom. If you do this, if you stand with me, I will rewrite my estate plan tonight. I will restructure the company ownership. I will ensure that Logan cannot touch a single cent that belongs to you. And he will never use my illness or your name to scam another dollar. I looked at the photos scattered on the desk. I looked at the medical file that proved my husband was a liar. I looked at the invitation that had erased me. I could leave. I could get in my rental car, drive back to the airport, fly to my mother's house in Ohio, and curl up in a ball. I could let the lawyers fight it out in 6 months. But if I left, Logan won. If I left, Sloane got to stand on that stage and accept the applause. If I left, I was just the background decoration he claimed I was. I stood up. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the camera app and took a picture of the hotel receipt with Mrs. Buck Logan Mercer printed on it. I am good at organizing, I said, my voice strong, and I am excellent at brand management. I think it is time we rebranded Logan. I looked at Richard for the first time in 5 years. I did not see a terrifying father-in-law. I saw a teammate. I saw the only other person in the world who understood exactly what kind of monster we were dealing with. I am not going anywhere, I said. I am staying for the party, and I am going to make sure it is a night he never forgets. Richard smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a general who had just acquired a nuclear weapon. Excellent, he said. Pour yourself another drink, Tesser. We have a lot of scanning to do. The dining room table had ceased to be a place for meals. It was now a command center. We had pushed the sad grocery store cake to the side, and in its place, we had spread out the oversized seating chart for the Garler. It looked like a battlefield map, color-coded and strategic. Move the chief financial officer to table 4, Richard said, pointing a steady finger at the diagram. I want him facing the screen directly. He needs to have an unobstructed view when the numbers start flashing. I peeled the sticky note labeled Marcus CFO off table 9 and stuck it firmly onto table 4. That puts him right next to your cardiologist, I noted. Perfect, Richard said, a grim smile touching his lips. Dr. Evans can check Marcus' blood pressure when he realizes the company funds were used to buy a villa in the Caribbean. It will be a 2-for-1 medical emergency. We were staging a trial, not a party. We treated every seat like a juror's box. The investors were grouped with the family, ensuring they would witness the emotional fallout firsthand. The board members were placed near the exit, subliminally suggesting they should be ready to walk away. Richard reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. He put it on speaker. "Marjorie," he said when the line clicked open. "It is Richard. I need you to come tomorrow night." A woman's voice, sharp and professional, crackled back. "Richard, I thought the directive from Caroline was family only for the head table, and I being undisinvited." "Forget Caroline," Richard said. "I need you to come as my guest, my old friend from college. But I need you to bring the briefcase, Marjorie, the heavy one. Draft the new will we discussed 6 months ago, the one I hesitated to sign, and bring the revocation papers for the power of attorney." There was a pause on the line. "You are finally doing it. I am burning the bridge while he is still standing on it," Richard said. "Be here by 6:00. And Marjorie, do not look like a lawyer. Wear the blue silk." "Understood," she said. The line went dead. I turned back to my laptop. My screen was a chaotic collage of timelines and receipts. I was doing what I did best. I was building a narrative. I had taken a legacy slideshow that the event planner had put together, a boring, sanitized collection of Richard playing golf and shaking hands, and I was remixing it. "Okay," I said, typing furiously. "I have the intro set. It starts sweet. Baby photos of Loven, family vacations from the 90s. It establishes an emotional bond. It makes the audience soften." "Good," Richard said. "Lull them into a false sense of security." Then we hit the transition at minute 4. I explained. "I am syncing the music just as the song swells to the crescendo. Instead of cutting to the photo of Loven graduating, I am splicing in the security footage from the hotel lobby in Cabo." I dragged the file into the timeline. It was grainy but undeniable. Loven, wearing his distinctive signate ring, signed a bill while Sloane kissed his neck. "I need a caption," I murmured. "Something that ties it to the company." "Use the date," Richard suggested. That was the weekend of the board retreat in Aspen, the one he claimed he was leading via video link because the connection was bad. I typed in the text overlay: board retreat. October 14th, location Cabo San Lucas, attendance 2. It was vicious. It was perfect. "I need to play my part," Richard said, practicing a slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his water glass. "If I look too strong tomorrow morning, he will get suspicious. He needs to believe I'm fading. He needs to believe the lion is toothless, so he puts his head in my mouth. And I need to be the doting, clueless wife," I said. I picked up my phone. I had to bait the track. I opened my text thread with Loven. "Hey babe," I typed. "Just got to the house. The blues look amazing. Do you want me to wear the silver dress or the blue one for your speech? I want to make sure I match the vibe." I hit send. My heart hammered against my ribs. 3 minutes later, the response came. "Blue is fine. Don't overthink it and don't make a big deal out of the speech. Okay, the investors are here for business. Just look pretty and keep the wine flowing. See you tomorrow." I showed the screen to Richard. "He is dismissing me. He is telling me to be furniture. He is digging his own grave with his thumbs." Richard noted. "I am going to record everything." I said, "I have a voice recorder app on my watch. I will have my phone in my clutch with the camera lens facing out. Every conversation he has with Sloane, every lie he tells a guest, every time he dismisses me, it is going into the cloud." "Speaking of the cloud," Richard said, his expression darkening. "What if he cuts the power? What if he tries to smash the laptop?" "I have a contingency," I said. I opened a secure messaging app and texted Near, my best friend in San Francisco. Near was an investigative journalist. She had nerves of steel and zero patience for rich men behaving badly. Package uploaded to the shared drive. I typed, "If I don't text you the code word pineapple by midnight tomorrow, send the link to the Harbor Falls Gazette and the board of directors." Nia replied instantly, "Got it. I have the email draft ready to go." Burn him to the ground. Tess. I looked at Richard. We have a dead man switch. If he tries to stop the presentation, the press gets the unedited version 5 minutes later. Richard nodded, satisfied. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the dark lake. "There is one more thing," he said quietly. "I called Dr. Evans, my cardiologist. Is everything okay?" I asked, panic flaring for a second. "I am fine," Richard said. "I asked him to come tomorrow as a guest, but I need him to perform a subtle cognitive evaluation on me before the party starts. I want a medical professional to certify in writing that I am of sound mind and body on the day I change my will. Logan will try to argue that I was senile. He will try to say, 'You manipulated a confused old man.' We need a doctor to say otherwise." "Smart," I said. "I am glad." We worked for another 2 hours. The silence of the house was no longer oppressive. It was charged with electricity. We were conspirators. We were two people who had been underestimated for too long, finally maximizing our potential. I finished the final edit of the video. I added the clip from tonight's live stream, the one where Logan called Sloan his ride or die. I placed it right at the end just before the words "Happy Birthday, Richard" were supposed to appear. I closed the laptop. "It is done." Richard turned from the window. He looked at the banner hanging in the hallway, the one that said, "Cheers to 60 years." "You know," he said, "I do not just want him to lose the money, Tesser. Money he can perhaps make again, though I doubt it without my capital. I want something else." "But," I asked. "I want him to be seen," Richard said, his voice shaking with a sudden raw intensity. "For his whole life, Logan has worn a mask. The golden boy, the beautiful son, the perfect husband. He wears it so well that sometimes I even believed it. I want that mask to be ripped off. I want him to stand in this room surrounded by the people whose respect he craves. And I want him to feel the cold air on his real face." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "I want him to look at you and realize that you were the best thing that ever happened to him, right at the moment he loses you forever." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "He will, Richard. I promise." "Go to sleep," Richard said gently. "You need your rest. Tomorrow is a big day." I went upstairs to the guest room. I refused to sleep in the master's suite, where Logan and I usually stayed. I lay down in the dark, but sleep was impossible. I walked out into the hallway and looked down into the foyer. The moonlight was filtering through the high windows, illuminating the banner, "Happy 60, Richard." It looked festive. It looked joyous. It was a lie. I touched the pocket of my robe where my wedding ring used to be. It was empty. I stood there alone in the silent house, listening to the wind rattle the glass. Tomorrow this room will be full of laughter, music, and champagne. Tomorrow the world will see the perfect Mercer family, and by the time the cake was cut, there would be nothing left of us but ruins. I wondered as I stared at the gold lettering of the banner if anyone would be left to sing happy birthday when the lights came back on, or if the only sound would be the shattering of a legacy that took 60 years to build and one night to destroy. The morning sun hit the lake with a deceptively cheerful brightness. But inside the Mercer house, the atmosphere was cold and clinical. We were no longer family members preparing for a celebration. We were investigators building a criminal case. My laptop was open on the kitchen island next to a stack of freshly printed bank statements, and my phone was recording everything. The first witness arrived at 9 in the morning, carrying a warm apple pie covered in foil. Mara was the next-door neighbor, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a history of watching the neighborhood through her blinds. She bustled into the kitchen, hugging Richard with a tenderness that made my throat tight. "I am so glad you are here this time," Tesser, Mara said, setting the pie down. She looked at me, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I was worried Richard would be alone again, like last year." I paused, my hand hovering over the coffee pot. "What do you mean?" "Logan told me he threw a private dinner for Richard last year. He said he cooked steaks, Mara scoffed, a harsh sound that dismissed my husband's lie instantly. Steaks, honey. Logan left the house at 4 in the afternoon. I saw his Porsche peel out of the driveway. He left Richard sitting on the porch in the dark until I came over with my husband to keep him company. We ordered pizza. I glanced at Richard. He was looking out the window, his jaw set tight. And the doctors, Mara continued, warming up to her subject. It breaks my heart. I saw Richard waiting at the end of the driveway 3 times last month, waiting for an Uber. Can you imagine a man with his condition standing in the rain waiting for a stranger to drive him to the cardiologist because his son could not be bothered? I tapped the screen of my phone, ensuring the voice memo app was capturing every word. Did Logan say why he could not drive him? Oh, he always has an excuse, Mara said, waving her hand. He told me once right in the driveway that he had to monitor the market opening in Tokyo. He said, Mara, time is money. And I told him, Logan, people trade stocks every day, but you only have one father. Mara shook her head. He just rolled his eyes and rolled up the window. I saved the recording. Evidence item 1, pattern of neglect. 30 minutes later, the catering staff began to arrive. I was arranging flowers in a foyer when the head chef, a young man named Diego, approached me with a clipboard. He looked confused. This is Mercer, he asked. Sorry, I mean MS. Caldwell. The run sheet has different names. Tesser is fine, I said. Right, Tesser. I just wanted to double-check the dietary restrictions one last time, Diego said, flipping through his pages. Mr. Mercer Logan, called me yesterday to add a specific menu. He said we needed a strict organic plant-based zero-oil menu for the VIP guests. The VIP guest, I repeated, my voice flat. MS. Part, Diego said, reading the name off the sheet. He was very specific. He said she treats her body like a temple. And then he said, Diego hesitated, looking uncomfortable. What did he say, Diego? I asked gently. It is okay. He told me to make sure we had plenty of sliders and fried calamari for the other table. Diego said, avoiding my eyes. He said, my wife loves that greasy stuff. It is not really the vibe for the main event, so just keep it on the side so she does not complain. I felt a flash of humiliation rise up my neck, hot and stinging. Logan knew I ate healthy. He knew I ran half marathons. This was not about food. This was about painting a caricature to the staff and to the guests. Sloane was the ethereal, disciplined goddess, and I was the sloppy, low-class wife who ate trash in the corner. Thank you, Diego, I said, keeping my smile fixed. Just stick to the plan. As soon as he walked away, I logged the time and the quote into my spreadsheet. Evidence item 2, character assassination and social exclusion. I needed a break. I went upstairs to the office Logan used when he visited. I told myself I was looking for extra napkins, but really, I was hunting. I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He had not logged out of his email. It was arrogant. But Logan had never believed anyone was smart enough to check on him. I searched for his correspondence with the Human Resources Department at Harbaugh Stone. I found an email chain from 3 days ago. The subject line was Event Protocol T. Caldwell. I clicked it open. The text made my blood run cold. From Logan Mercer to Sarah Jenkins, HR Director Sarah. Regarding the Garler, let's keep Tesser's interaction with the key stakeholders limited. She has been going through a rough patch emotionally. Very volatile. I don't want her having any episodes in front of the investors. If she tries to corner anyone to talk about her design agency, just politely steer them towards Sloane. Sloane is fully briefed on the narrative. Let's frame Tesser's absence from the main presentation as a health break. It is for her own good. He was planting the seeds of insanity. If I got angry tonight, if I cried, if I shouted at him for cheating, he would just look at the investors and shrug as if to say, see, I told you she was unstable. I forwarded the email to my secret account and then to Richard downstairs. Richard had just returned from a coffee run. He walked into the library where I was setting up my command center. He looked energized, his eyes bright with the thrill of the hunt. I met Caleb, Richard said, locking the door behind him. Caleb was the former junior accountant at Harbaugh Stone. He had been a sweet kid, fresh out of college, until he was abruptly transferred to the archives department in the basement 6 months ago. What did he say? I asked. He talked, Richard said, pulling a crumpled napkin covered in notes out of his pocket. He was terrified, but he talked. He confirmed that Logan ordered him to alter the quarterly expense reports. Richard smoothed the napkin out on the desk. There is a recurring line item for strategic consulting, Richard explained. $5,000 a month paid to a shell company called Heart Solutions, Sloan. I said. Khaled asked for an invoice to back up the payments, Richard said. Logan told him to stop asking questions if he wanted to keep his job when Khaled refused to sign off on the audit. Logan had him transferred the next day. He replaced him with a temp who signs whatever Logan puts in front of him. That is fraud, I said. That is corporate embezzlement. It is a felony, Richard corrected me. And now we have a witness. We spent the next hour compiling everything. I used my designed software to create a master file. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. I created a timeline that stretched across the screen. I color-coded the evidence. Red for infidelity, the photos from Carbo, the text messages, the hotel receipts, green for financial crimes, the withdrawals from the medical trust, the fake consulting fees, the stolen savings, gold for reputation, damage, the lies to the neighbors, the emails to HR, the humiliation with the catering staff. It was a dossier of destruction. Just as I was printing the first set of documents, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Caroline Mercer. I looked at Richard. He nodded. Answer it. Put it on speaker. I tapped the green button. Hello, Caroline. Tesser, darling. Her voice was high and breathless, the fake warmth radiating through the speaker. I am just calling to check in. Are the flowers there? Did the caterer set up the bar correctly? Everything is perfect. Caroline, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. The house looks beautiful. Oh, good, she said. Listen, I wanted to give you a little advice for tonight. You know how Logan is. How is he? I asked innocently. He is just so stressed about his father. Caroline sighed. He has been carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. So, tonight, please do not bring up Richard's health in front of him. Don't talk about doctors or surgeries. Logan gets so emotional about it. He just wants to focus on happy times. I stared at the phone. The audacity was breathtaking. She was asking me to silence the victim to protect the predator's feelings. She was asking me to help them pretend that Richard was not dying of a broken heart and a drained bank account. I understand, I said, my voice icy. I will make sure Logan does not have to deal with any reality tonight. Perfect, she chirped. You are a good wife, Tesser. See you at 6. The line went dead. Richard let out a short, dry laugh. I am a burden to them, he said softly. My illness is inconvenient unless they can use it to sell stock. My survival is an annoyance. Not to me, I said fiercely. Not to the jury we are assembling tonight. I took the recorded call and dragged the file into the timeline. It was the final piece of the puzzle. It proved that the gaslighting was a family tradition. I gathered the printed documents. I organized them into a sleek, black folder. I labeled the front cover with a simple, elegant font for the party. It looked like a program. It looked like a menu, but inside it was a bomb. I walked over to the buffet table in the dining room. The caterers were busy in the kitchen, and the room was empty. I opened the top drawer of the sideboard right next to the silver cake knife that would be used later that evening. I placed the folder inside. Why there? Richard asked, watching me. Because, I said, sliding the drawer shut with a satisfying click. When the chaos starts, when Logan tries to lie his way out of it, he is going to look for a way to regain control. He will come here to cut the cake. He will try to make a toast to smooth things over. I looked at Richard, and when he opens this drawer to get the knife, I said, he is going to find the truth. The shadows were lengthening across the lawn, reaching toward the house like long, dark fingers. The stage was set. The actors were in place, and the evidence was waiting in the silverware drawer. They'll get changed, Richard said. The show starts in 2 hours. I nodded and turned toward the stairs. I felt a strange sense of calm. I was no longer the wife who had flown home hoping to save her marriage. I was the prosecutor, ready to deliver her opening statement, and I had never lost a pitch in my life. The house was quiet, settled into that deep, vibrating silence that only happens in the countryside right before a storm. Outside, the lake was a black void, but inside, the stage was lit. I stood in the center of the living room, the gold and silver balloons bobbing gently against the ceiling and the draft from the air conditioning. I checked my reflection in the dark window. I did not look like a woman who had spent the last 6 hours compiling a dossier of felony fraud and adultery. I looked like a wife. I had touched up my lipstick, smoothed my hair, and put on the eager, slightly desperate smile that Logan seemed to prefer on me lately. "Are you ready?" Richard asked from the shadows of the armchair. "I am always ready," I said. "I have been rehearsing for this role for 5 years." I unlocked my phone and tapped the FaceTime icon. My thumb hovered over Logan's name. It felt like pulling the pin on a grenade, but instead of throwing it, I was holding it tight against my chest. I pressed the call button. The screen blurred, pixelated, and then snapped into focus. Logan was not in a conference room. He was not in a cab. He was in a hotel room that screamed money. The lighting was low and golden, the kind designed to flatter complexions and hide sins. Behind him, I could see the soft, blurred outline of a massive headboard and artfully arranged pillows. He was wearing a white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled up. He looked handsome. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who did not have a single care in the world. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice smooth though his eyes darted slightly to the left of the screen before locking onto mine. "You made it. How is the house?" "It is perfect, Logan," I said, pitching my voice up an octave, infusing it with a breathless excitement that made my stomach churn. I walked around the room, holding the phone up to show off the decorations. "Look at the banner." And the balloon arch came out exactly like the mood board. "I think your dad is going to love it." Logan glanced at the screen with barely concealed boredom. "Yeah, it looks great. Nice work. Just make sure the balloons do not block the view of the lake. The investors want to see the property value, not just latex." "Right," I said, forcing a laugh. "Of course, property value first." I sat down on the sofa, bringing the phone closer to my face. I needed to see his eyes. I needed to record the lie. I tapped the screen recording button on my control center. The tiny red dot appeared in the corner, silent and witnessing. So I started keeping my tone light. "I wanted to ask you about the playlist for tomorrow for the cake cutting. Do you want something classic like Sinatra or something more upbeat?" And I was thinking, right before you give your speech, I could cue up the presentation I made. Logan frowned, a small crease appearing between his eyebrows. He took a sip of a drink that looked like expensive scotch. "What presentation?" he asked. "The one for the new branding strategy," I said, widening my eyes innocently. "The one I have been working on for 3 weeks. I thought it would be a great way to show your dad and the board how we are modernizing the company. I have the slides ready on my laptop." Logan sighed. It was a long performative sigh that I knew well. It was the sound he made when I was being difficult or stupid or both. "Tesser, honey," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing edge he used when explaining why I could not buy a new lens for my camera. "Let's not overcomplicate things. Tomorrow is a celebration. It is about legacy. It is about me stepping up to honor Dad. The guests want to hear about the growth story. They want the big picture financial vision. They do not want to sit through 20 minutes of font choices and color palettes. It is not just fonts, Logan," I said, letting a tiny bit of genuine hurt bleed into the act. "It is the entire market positioning. You said you wanted to show them the future." "I do," he said, checking his watch. "And I will tell them about it. But let's keep the trivial design stuff for a breakout session next month. Okay? It is just not the right vibe for a 60-year jubilee. Trust me on this trivial design stuff." That was what my career was to him. My award-winning agency, my years of experience, my contribution to his family's wealth. It was all just arts and crafts to keep the little woman busy while the men did the real work. "Okay," I said, looking down. "I understand. You are the expert." "That is my girl," he said, flashing a winning smile. "Just look pretty. Make sure the wine keeps coming and let me handle the room." I paused for a beat, letting the silence stretch just long enough to be uncomfortable. I heard Sloan is coming, I said. The smile on his face froze for a microcount. It was imperceptible to anyone who did not know him, but I knew every muscle in his face. His jaw tightened. Yet he said, recovering quickly, "She is flying in tomorrow morning. She has been helping me prep the numbers for the acquisition. She is great with the Asian markets." "I bet," I said. "It must be nice to have so much help. I feel like you guys are joined at the hip lately. Should I be worried?" I laughed at the end, making it sound like a joke, like a silly, insecure wife fishing for a compliment. Logan shook his head, looking disappointed in me. "Tesser, come on. Do not start this again. Not tonight. I am exhausted. I am sitting here in a hotel room going over spreadsheets, trying to secure our future, and you are doing the jealous wife routine. It is unbecoming." "I am sorry," I said quickly. "I just miss you. It is lonely here." "Sloan is Tesser's business partner," he said firmly. "That is it. She helps me handle the clients. She takes the load off so I can focus on the big deals. You should be grateful she is around." As he spoke, something moved in the background. It was a shadow, quick and fluid, passing across the mirror on the far wall behind him. It was the silhouette of a woman. She was wearing a robe. I saw the flash of a bare leg. Logan did not see it. He was too busy staring at the camera, lying to my face. My heart hammered against my ribs. But I kept my expression frozen in a mask of apology. "You are right," I said. "I am sorry, baby. I am just stressed about the party. Go back to your spreadsheets. I will see you tomorrow. Get some sleep," he said dismissively. "And do not wait up. I have a late conference call." He hung up. The screen went black. I sat there for a moment, staring at my own reflection. I stopped the screen recording and saved the video. I replayed the last 10 seconds, zooming in on the mirror in the background. There it was, the undeniable shape of a woman in a hotel room where my husband claimed to be working alone. "He is good," Richard said from the corner. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion. He almost had me believing he was actually working. "He is not working," I said, standing up and walking over to him. "He is pre-gaming." Richard held out his hand. "Give me the phone." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I want to hear it myself," Richard said. "I want to look him in the eye, or at least listen to his voice and see if he has the courage to lie to his dying father." He just hung up, I warned. "He might not answer." "He will answer me," Richard said. "He still needs my signature on the trust transfer." I dialed Logan again. This time, I tapped the speakerphone icon and set the device on the coffee table between us. It rang 4 times. Finally, Logan picked up. He did not turn on the video this time. It was audio only. There. Logan's voice came through, breathless and slightly annoyed. "Is everything okay? I just got off with Tesser. She said the house looks great." Richard leaned forward toward the phone. He closed his eyes for a second, centering himself. When he opened them, he was in character. He let out a soft, wet cough. His voice trembled, sounding 10 years older than he actually was. "Logan," Richard rasped, "I am sorry to bother you, son. I know you are busy." "It is fine, Dad," Logan said, his tone shifting instantly to a performative concern that made my skin crawl. "What do you need? Is it your heart? Do you need me to call Dr. Evans?" "No, no," Richard said, taking a shallow breath. I am feeling very tired tonight. Logan, the medication makes me feel heavy. I was just sitting here thinking about tomorrow. 60 years. It feels like a long time. You are going to be fine, Dad," Logan said quickly. "You just need rest. Don't worry about tomorrow. I have everything handled. Sloan and I are going to run the show. You just have to sit there and wave." "I know," Richard said. "You are a good boy. I was just wondering, since I'm not feeling up to a big entrance, would you come home a little early tomorrow? Maybe skip the brunch with the investors. I would like to have a quiet dinner, just family, you, me, and Tesser." Before the madness starts, there was silence on the other end. I could practically hear the gears turning in Logan's head. He was weighing the value of comforting his father against the pleasure of a leisurely morning with his mistress. I wish I could, Dad, Logan said, his voice thick with fake regret. You know, I would love that, but I have already locked in a breakfast meeting with the partners from the venture capital firm. It is a crucial meeting. If I cancel now, it looks like weakness. I am doing this for the company, for your legacy. I see, Richard said softly. Business first. It is for us, Logan. I will be there by 4:00. We can have a quick toast then, just the two of us. By the way, Richard said, shifting gears smoothly, I was looking at the papers you sent over last week, the loan application against the family trust. Oh, Logan's voice sharpened instantly. The concern vanished. Yeah. Did you sign it? I am looking at it, Richard said. $2 million is a lot of money, Logan, especially with the market being so volatile. Does Tessa know about this? Does she know you are leveraging the family safety net? I held my breath. This was the test. Logan laughed. It was a dismissive boys' club chuckle. Dad, come on, Logan said. Why would I tell Tessa? She is creative. She gets anxious if the restaurant bill is over $100. She does not understand high leverage. This is internal business. It is between men. We do not need to worry about her pretty little head with the heavy lifting, right? I felt the blood drain from my face. Internal business between men. So you have not told her, Richard confirmed. No, Logan said flatly. And you shouldn't either. It will just upset her. And then she will be nagging me about risk management all night. Let me handle Tessa. I know how to manage her. You manage her, Richard. Like an employee, like a partner who needs guidance. Logan said, Look, Dad, I have to run. My dinner reservation is in 10 minutes. Sign the papers. I will pick them up tomorrow. Love you. The line clicked dead. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence before. Richard sat back in his chair, his frail old man persona dropping like a heavy coat. He looked at the phone with a gaze of pure cold disgust. He does not just betray you, Richard said quietly. He does not even see you as a person. You are an asset, a depreciating asset that he is planning to write off. He called me a creative who gets anxiety over a bill. I said, my voice steady but hollow. I am the one who balanced our books for 3 years while he was buying sports cars. He needs to believe that narrative. Richard said he needs to believe you are weak and incompetent, because if he admitted you were his equal, he would have to feel guilty for what he is doing to you. Dehumanizing you is how he sleeps at night. I stood up and walked to the window. The reflection of the room was behind me. The balloons, the streamers, the lies. He is going to that dinner with her right now. I said he is going to spend $200 on a steak using your credit card, and he is going to laugh with her about how he handled the old man and the anxious wife. Let him eat, Richard said. It is his last supper. I turned off the lights in the living room. One by one, the lamps clicked off, plunging the space into darkness. The only light came from the moon on the water outside. Go to bed, Richard. I said, we have a long day tomorrow. Richard nodded and slowly climbed the stairs. I stayed downstairs for a moment longer. I looked at the empty spot on my finger where my wedding ring used to sit. It felt light. It felt free. I remembered the vows I had made 5 years ago. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. Logan had broken every single one of them. He had taken the richer and left me the poorer. He had taken the better and left me the worse. But he had forgotten the most important part of a marriage vow. He had forgotten that it was a covenant. And when you break a covenant with a woman who has spent her life building brands and controlling narratives, you do not get to walk away clean. I stood in the dark listening to the house breathe. I did not cry. I cried on the plane. I had cried in the rental car. I had cried enough tears to fill that lake outside. Now I am dry. I was arid. I was a desert where nothing could grow, least of all forgiveness. No more tears, I whispered to the empty room. Not for him. Not ever again. I turned and walked up the stairs, my footsteps silent on the plush carpet. Tomorrow I will put on the blue dress. I would smile. I would pour the wine. And then I would burn his world down, and I would not even blink when the smoke got in my eyes. The morning of the party did not feel like a celebration. It felt like the final countdown of a military operation. By 8:00 in the morning, The house was vibrating with the sound of hammers and drills. A team of contractors was erecting a massive glittering backdrop on the terrace that read 60 and still bolden in cursive neon letters. It was gorgeous. It was loud. It was exactly the kind of performative wealth Logan loved to display. I stood in the center of the living room, ignoring the florists who were weaving garlands of white roses around the staircase. My focus was entirely on the ceiling-mounted projector. A little to the left, I directed the technician. "No, tilt it down more, lady. If I tilt it any more, it is going to hit the centerpiece on table 4. The technician grumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Exactly," I said, my voice crisp. "Table 4 is where the board of directors is sitting. I want them to see every pixel. If the image is washed out, nobody gets paid." He shrugged and tightened the screws. I climbed the ladder myself to check the angle. It was perfect. The beam of light would cut directly across the room. Impossible to ignore. This was not just a screen for a slideshow. It was the canvas for my husband's destruction. At 10:00, a black sedan pulled up the gravel driveway. Marjorie Blake stepped out. She looked every inch the society guest in a navy silk dress and pearls, but the heavy leather briefcase in her hand told a different story. Dr. Evans, Richard's cardiologist, arrived 2 minutes later carrying a smaller medical bag disguised as a gift. We gathered in Richard's study and locked the heavy double doors. The sound of the party prep outside was muffled, replaced by the scratch of pens and the rustle of legal paper. Richard sat behind his desk. He was not wearing the cardigan he used for his sick old man act. He was wearing a crisp button-down shirt, his spine straight, his eyes clear. "Let's get this done," Richard said. Marjorie opened the briefcase and laid out 3 thick documents. "This is the revocable living trust restated as of today," Marjorie said, her tone clipped and professional. "It transfers the ownership of the Harbaughstone estate, the liquidity accounts, and the majority voting shares of the equity group into the Mercer Protection Trust." She looked at me. "And this designates the sole trustee." I stepped forward. My hand did not shake as I took the pen. I signed my name, Tesser Caldwell, on the line. With that signature, I became the legal guardian of the empire Logan thought he was inheriting. I was now the gatekeeper of the fortune he intended to steal. "And the allowances?" Richard asked. Marjorie flipped to page 40. "Here is the clause regarding Logan. He is removed from all executive decision-making roles effective immediately. He is eligible for a monthly stipend." I looked at the number. It was enough to live on, but it was not enough to fly private jets or rent suites at the Esperanza Resort, provided, Marjorie continued, reading the fine print with a hint of a smile, "that he maintains 90% attendance at a court-approved financial responsibility counseling program. If he misses a session, the stipend is suspended." I looked at Richard. "You are sending him to financial rehab." "He treated me like a child who could not manage my own checkbook," Richard said, his voice hard. "He told the board I needed supervision. I think it is only fair that I return the favor. If he wants money, he can learn how to value it." "Now for the medical clearance," Marjorie said, turning to the doctor. Dr. Evans stepped forward. He did not have a stethoscope out. Instead, he pulled out a standardized cognitive assessment form. "Richard," Dr. Evans said formally, "I need to ask you a few questions to certify your capacity to sign these documents." "But is the date today?" "October 21st, Richard answered instantly. "Who is the current president of the United States?" Richard answered. "Count backward from 100 by 7s. 193, 86, 79. Richard rattled the numbers off with the precision of the mathematician he had been before he became a tycoon. Dr. Evans nodded and signed the affidavit at the bottom of the will. "I certify that Richard Mercer is fully oriented, cognitively sharp, and under no duress. Any claim of dementia or incapacity will not hold up in court for 5 seconds. "Thank you, Doctor," Richard said. He signed the final page of the will. The scratch of the pen sounded like a gavel coming down. Marjorie packed the documents away. "I will file these electronically within the hour. By the time Logan raises his glass for the toast, he will already be disinherited." They left the room to mingle as early guests. I stayed behind for a moment with Richard. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold, heavy resolve. "Go get ready," Richard said gently. "You need to look the part." I went upstairs to the guest suite. My dress was hanging on the back of the door. I bought it yesterday in town using my own credit card. It was black. It was a cocktail dress, elegant and fitted with a neckline that was sharp and architectural. It was beautiful, but it was undeniably severe. It was the kind of dress a woman wears to a funeral, where she is the prime suspect, or perhaps the widow, who knows exactly how the husband died. It was a mourning dress for marriage that was already a corpse. I put it on. I applied my makeup with surgical precision, sharp eyeliner, matte red lips. I did not look like the soft, earthy designer Loban had married. I looked dangerous. I reached into my bag and pulled out the USB drive. It was small, silver, and innocent-looking. I held it in my palm for a second. Inside this tiny piece of metal was the video from Carbo, the photos of the hotel receipts, and the audio of Loban mocking his father. I went downstairs. The room was empty for a brief window of time before the staff began the final service prep. I walked over to the laptop connected to the projector. I inserted the USB drive. I opened the presentation file. I found the transition point right after the slide of Richard holding Loban as a baby. I dragged the new video file into the timeline. I set the transition to automatic. I set the volume to maximum. I saved the file. I pulled the USB drive out and slipped it into my clutch. Now, even if they tried to stop the laptop, the file was cached in the system. The mine was armed. "Mrs. Thursor." I turned around. A young server was standing there with a tray of place cards. "We are just doing the final check for the head table," she said, nervously. "I have a card here from Mrs. Loban Mercer. Is that where you're sitting, or is that for the other lady?" She looked embarrassed. The staff knew. Everyone knew. The gossip had probably been circulating in the kitchen all morning about the special vegan menu for the mistress. I walked over to the table. I looked at the card. "Mrs. Loban Mercer." It looked like a brand name. It looked like a label of ownership. "No," I said softly. I picked up a pen from the table. I took the card and crossed out Mrs. Loban Mercer in clear block letters. I wrote Tesser Caldwell. "Please use this one," I said, handing it back to the girl. "I am not Mrs. Mercer tonight. I am Tesser." The girl looked at me, her eyes wide. Then she nodded, a flash of respect crossing her face. "Yes, Miss Caldwell, I will change it right now." I turned to see Richard standing in the doorway. He was leaning on his cane, dressed in his tuxedo. He looked frail. His shoulders slumped, the perfect picture of the ailing patriarch, but his eyes were locked on the place card in the server's hand. He walked over to me, his limp exaggerated for any watching staff, but when he got close, he stood tall. "I am sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you from him. I let him bring you into this house, and I let him treat you like an accessory." "You did not know," I said. "I suspected," Richard corrected, "but I did not want to believe my son was capable of this level of cruelty. I chose comfort over truth, and you paid the price." I reached out and straightened his bow tie. "Bizarrely, Richard, I think this is the best gift you could have given me. You gave me the chance to save myself. Most women in my position just get served divorce papers and a gag order. You gave me a gavel." Richard smiled, a sad, wintry expression. "Then let's use it." He gestured to the cake that was sitting on the sideboard, waiting for the evening. It was not the sad grocery store cake from last night. It was a masterpiece of fondant and sugar work, 3 tiers high, decorated with gold leaf. "Let's practice," Richard said. "I want to make sure the lighter works. I do not want to fumble when everyone is watching." He picked up the silver lighter. He struck the flame. It flared up blue and orange in the dim light. He held it near one of the unlit candles. "Make a wish," I whispered. "It is your birthday after all." Richard looked at the flame. He looked at the reflection of the room in the window, the track we had set, the seats we had arranged like a jury box, the projector that held the I want to live long enough to see him take responsibility for the wreckage he has caused. He blew out the lighter. The flame vanished, leaving a thin trail of smoke curling into the air. And I wish, he added, looking at me, that when the smoke clears, you're the one standing tall. I will be, I said. Outside, the sound of gravel crunching signaled the arrival of the first cars. The doors opened. The noise of the world rushed in. "Showtime, Tesser," Richard said. He hunched his shoulders, gripped his cane tighter, and transformed back into the dying old man. I smoothed my black dress, lifted my chin, and walked toward the door to welcome the guests to the funeral of my marriage. The driveway of the Mercer estate began to fill up shortly after 6:00. From my vantage point near the grand staircase, I watched the parade of wealth roll in. It was a procession of glossy black SUVs and low-slung sports cars, their headlights cutting through the twilight. The guests stepped out onto the gravel, adjusting their velvet blazers and diamond earrings, their laughter floating up to the house like smoke. These were the captains of industry in Harbor Falls. There were the venture capitalists who had funded Richard's first expansion 20 years ago. There were the local politicians who relied on Mercer campaign donations. There was a reporter from the Harbor Business Journal looking eager and holding a recording device, thinking he was about to document a heartwarming story of family succession. They walked through the front doors, handing their coats to the staff, completely unaware that they were entering a crime scene. They thought they were here to eat cake and toast a legacy. They had no idea they had been cast as the jury. I stood perfectly still in my black dress. I was the hostess, yet I felt like a ghost haunting my own home. I greeted people with a smile that did not reach my eyes. "So good to see you," I said to Mr. Man Henderson, a board member who had known Logan since he was a boy. "Tesser, you look lovely," he said, patting my arm, "though I must say, you look a bit thin. Logan told me you have been under a lot of stress lately with the agency. Remember to take time for yourself." "I am managing," I said, my voice cool. "Logan worries too much. He is a good man." Henderson nodded, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing tray, always thinking of others. I watched him walk away. The seed had been planted. To them, I was the fragile, overworked wife, and Logan was the saint who tolerated me. Then, the heavy oak doors opened wide, and the main act arrived. Caroline entered first, wearing a silver gown that shimmered under the chandelier lights. She looked regal, the queen mother of Harbaugh Stone. Behind her came Logan and Sloane. I watched the choreography closely. It was a masterpiece of deception. Outside in the dark of the car, they had likely been holding hands, but as they crossed the threshold, they separated with practiced ease. Logan stepped to the right, buttoning his tuxedo jacket, assuming the pose of the host. Sloane stepped to the left, clutching a sleek leather portfolio as if to signal, "I am just here for work." But the energy between them was undeniable. It was a magnetic pull. They glanced at each other. A quick, hungry look that vanished the moment they realized people were watching. Caroline spotted me instantly. She glided across the foyer, her smile fixed in place like a porcelain mask. She opened her arms and pulled me into a hug that felt as warm as a block of ice. "Tesser," she whispered against my ear, the smell of her expensive floral perfume suffocating me. "You are wearing black. A bit somber for a birthday, isn't it?" "It is elegant, Caroline," I whispered back. She pulled away, keeping her hands on my shoulders, her nails digging in slightly through the fabric. Her eyes darted around the room to ensure no one was close enough to hear. "Listen to me," she hissed. "Logan is on edge. The investors are watching everything tonight. Do not make this evening about you. Do not bring up your little marital issues. Do not cry. Do not cause a scene. We are here to honor Richard, not to indulge your drama." "I have no intention of crying." "Caroline," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "I am here to support the truth." "Good," she said, mistaking my meaning entirely. "Just keep the wine flowing and stay out of the way of the presentation." She patted my cheek, a gesture that was half affection, half warning, and turned to greet the mayor's wife with a high-pitched squeal of delight. I looked past her to Logan. He was working in the room. He was in his element, shaking hands, clapping men on the back, flashing that charming boyish grin that had won me over 5 years ago. He looked successful. He looked trustworthy. He saw me and made his way over, weaving through the crowd. When he reached me, he placed his hand on the small of my back to the room. It looked like a gesture of affection. To me, it felt like a brand. Hey, he murmured, leaning in close. Smiled Tess. You look like you are at a funeral. I am just focused, I said. Is everything ready for your speech? Yes, yes, he said, scanning the room over my shoulder. His eyes landed on Sloane, who was standing near the bar, laughing with the event planner. Look, just make sure the servers keep the appetizers moving near the investors. I saw the CFO looking for a waiter. We cannot have them waiting. I will handle it, I said. Good girl, he said. He gave my back a patronizing pat and walked away. Heading straight toward Sloane, he did not touch her, but he stood close enough that their sleeves brushed. He whispered something to her, and she threw her head back and laughed, exposing her long, elegant neck. I watched Sloane. She was not acting like a guest. She was moving through the space with the confidence of an owner. I saw her signal the DJ, making a cutting motion across her throat to kill a slow jazz track and switch to something more upbeat. I saw her stop a waiter and point toward a spill on the rug, directing him to clean it up. She was already measuring the drapes. She was already redecorating in her mind. She looked at the house not as a venue, but as a prize she had already won. She is very efficient, isn't she? I turned. It was Aunt Beatrice, Richard's younger sister. She was holding a martini and looking at me with an expression that sat somewhere between pity and curiosity. But, I asked. That woman, Sloane, Beatrix said, lowering her voice. Lobin introduced her as a consultant, but she seems to know her way around the kitchen and the staff. Beatrix leaned in closer, her breath smelling of gin. I heard you have been having a hard time, dear. Lobin told us about the episodes, the anxiety. My stomach clenched, so that was the story. I was crazy. I am fine. Beatrix, I said stiffly. Lobin tends to exaggerate. Beatrix patted my hand. It is okay to be overwhelmed. Honey, not everyone is cut out for the pressure of this lifestyle. Just try to relax tonight. Let Lobin handle the heavy lifting. She walked away, leaving me standing there with my fingernails digging into my palms. They all looked at me and saw a broken doll. They saw a woman who was lucky to be allowed in the room. Suddenly, the chatter in the room died down. A hush rippled through the crowd, starting at the door and spreading to the back terrace. Richard had arrived. He stood at the entrance of the main hall. He was leaning heavily on his cane, his body hunched over as if the weight of the tuxedo was too much for him. His face was pale. He looked every one of his 60 years, and then some. Happy birthday, Richard! Someone shouted. The room erupted in applause. Richard nodded slowly, acknowledging the cheers with a weak wave of his hand. He took a few shuffling steps forward, and I saw Logan rushed to his side, grabbing his elbow to support him. I have got you, Dad, Logan said, loudly, ensuring everyone saw the beautiful son helping the invalid father. Thank you, son, Richard murmured into the microphone on Logan's lapel. But as they walked past me, Richard looked up. For a split second, the hunch vanished from his posture. His eyes locked onto mine, and they were not the eyes of a sick man. They were the eyes of a sniper who had just verified his target. He gave me the slightest nod, imperceptible to anyone else, before slumping back onto Logan's arm. They made their way to the small stage set up in front of the French doors. The neon sign, 60 and still golden, buzzed softly behind them. The projector screen I had set up was blank, a white square waiting for judgment. Logan helped Richard into a chair on the stage, arranging a blanket over his legs as if he were an invalid in a wheelchair. Then Logan stepped to the podium. He adjusted the microphone, flashed that million-dollar smile, and silenced the room with his charisma. Thank you all for coming, Logan began, his voice rich and commanding. Tonight is a milestone. Not just for my father, but for the family that he built, for the company that he built. He paused for effect, looking affectionately at Richard. We all know the story of Harbaugh Stone, Logan continued. We know the grit, the determination, the late nights. My father is a hero. He is the bedrock of this community. The crowd murmured in agreement. Glasses clinked. But even heroes get tired, Logan said, his voice dropping to a somber, respectful register. And as many of you know, Dad has been fighting a brave battle with his health lately. It has been hard on all of us, but it has also been a time of clarity. It has been a time to look at the future. He gripped the sides of the podium, looking out at the investors in the front row. "I promised my father that I would carry his torch," Logan said. "I promised him that I would take Harbaughstone into the next era, an era of aggression, of expansion, of new blood." He gestured toward Sloane, who was standing near the front, beaming up at him. "We have brought on incredible new partners to help us achieve that vision," Logan said. "People who share our drive, people who are not afraid to take risks." Then he looked at me. He did not smile. He looked at me with a kind of benevolent dismissal. "And of course," Logan said, "I have to thank my wife, Tessa, who is standing back there in the shadows where she is most comfortable." A few people laughed politely. "Tessa keeps the home fires burning," Logan said. "She handles the domestic front so I can be out there on the battlefield. She is the quiet support that every man needs to keep him balanced. Thank you, Tessa, for holding down the fort while I built the empire." The insult was wrapped in silk, but it cut deep. He was erasing my career. He was erasing my intellect. He was reducing me to a housewife who waited by the door while the men did the important work. I felt the remote control in the pocket of my dress. It was warm against my palm. My thumb hovered over the button. "So," Logan said, raising his champagne flute high, "I would like to propose a toast to Richard Mercer, to 60 years of greatness and to the future of Harbaughstone, which starts tonight. To my family, to my family," the crowd echoed, raising their glasses. "To my family," I whispered. I looked at Logan. He was glowing with triumph. He thought he had won. He thought the narrative was sealed. He thought I was just a prop in the background. I pressed the button. The projector hummed to life. A beam of pure white light cut through the dim room, hitting the screen behind Logan's head. The crowd turned their eyes to the stage. Logan smiled, expecting to see the first slide of his father's childhood photos. Instead, the speakers crackled and the sound of ocean waves filled the room. The room was bathed in the soft, nostalgic glow of the projector beam. The music was a swelling orchestral piece designed to tug at the heartstrings of every donor and investor in the room. The first few slides were safe. They were the curated history of the Mercer family. There was Richard in 1985 standing in front of his first warehouse looking young and hungry. Applause. There was a photo of Richard holding a baby Logan on a fishing boat, both of them laughing at a trout that was too small to keep. A collective oar from the crowd. There was the family portrait from 10 years ago, everyone in matching white linen shirts on the beach. It was the perfect image of American success. Logan stood on the stage, smiling benevolently at the screen, basking in the reflected glory of his father's life. He looked confident. He looked safe. He took a sip of his champagne, nodding at the CFO in the front row. Then the slide transitioned. The header on the screen changed from the early years to the team behind the dream. The photos shifted. They were no longer professional portraits. They were candid shots from recent company galas and charity events, but I had selected them carefully. In every single photo, Logan was center stage holding a microphone or shaking a hand. And in every single photo, I was in the background. There was a photo of me on my knees taping down a loose cable at the charity ball while Logan laughed with the mayor. There was a photo of me holding 3 different laptops in a coffee cup, standing in the shadows of a conference room while Logan presented my designs to the board. There was a photo of me fixing his tie, my face anxious and tired while he looked over my shoulder at his phone. The room grew quieter. The narrative was shifting. It was subtle, but the message was clear. I was not a partner. I was a staff member. "He really relies on her, doesn't he?" a woman whispered near me. "She looks exhausted," her husband replied. Logan shifted his weight on the stage. He glanced at the screen, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. This was not the reel he had approved. He looked at me. I met his gaze and raised my glass. Then the screen went black for a full second. The music stopped abruptly. The silence in the room was sudden and jarring, like a vacuum sealing shut. When the image returned, it was high definition. It was vibrant. It was undeniable. It was a still photo. Logan was standing on a balcony. The turquoise ocean stretched out behind him. He was wearing a white hotel bathrobe, open at the chest, holding a glass of amber liquid. His arm was wrapped tight around the waist of a woman. Her back was to the camera, but her dark hair cascaded down her back, and she was wearing a distinctive red silk kimono. The text overlay appeared in bold white letters at the bottom of the screen. Birthday weekend, October 14th, Cabo San Lucas. A murmur rippled through the crowd. October 14th. Wait, the CFO said, his voice carrying in the silence. That was the day of the crisis meeting. Logan said he was in Seattle. Logan froze. The color drained from his face, so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. He stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. Before he could speak, the photo dissolved into a video. The sound of wind and splashing water filled the room. The camera was shaky, clearly filmed from a distance, but the zoom lens did its job. It was an infinity pool. Logan was there, shirtless, wet hair slicked back. Sloane was there. She was facing the camera this time. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her arms wrapped around Logan's neck. To the acquisition, Sloane shouted in the video, clinking her glass against his. To us, Logan replied, his voice crystal clear through the surround sound speakers. And to get the old man to sign the papers. He kissed her. It was long. It was passionate. It was the kind of kiss you give someone when you think you own the world. The room did not gasp. It went dead silent. It was the silence of 40 wealthy, influential people realizing they were witnessing a social execution. Sloane, who was standing near the front of the stage, dropped her clutch. The sound of it hitting the hardwood floor was like a gunshot. Someone in the back row whispered loud and sharp, Is that the consultant? It is Sloane Hart. Another voice confirmed. My God, she is standing right there. Every head in the room turned. They looked at the screen, then at Logan, then at Sloane, and finally at me. Logan snapped. Turn it off. He screamed. His voice cracked high and panicked. He lunged toward the AV table where the laptop was sitting. Cut the feed now. He scrambled off the stage, tripping over the hem of the velvet curtain. He looked wild, his eyes manic. Kill the power, he yelled at the DJ. Shut it down. The DJ looked at him terrified and reached for the main power switch, but Marjorie Blake stepped out from behind a pillar. She was holding a small silver USB drive in her hand, and she looked like a shark in a silk dress. I would not do that, Marjorie said calmly. We have 3 backup copies, and one is currently scheduled to auto-send to the board of directors email list in exactly 2 minutes. Logan stopped. He looked at Marjorie, then at the screen where the video was now looping the moment he toasted to getting the old man to sign. On the stage, Richard moved. He did not struggle to stand. He did not reach for his cane. He stood up straight, grabbed the microphone from the podium, and tapped it twice. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the chaos, drawing everyone's attention back to the frail patriarch. If you have not quite caught up, Richard said, his voice raspy, but cutting through the room like a serrated knife. Allow me to clarify the caption. He pointed a shaking finger at the frozen image of his son, kissing his mistress. That is my son, Logan, Richard said, filmed on the weekend. He told me he was on a business trip to save this company. The trip he billed to my corporate expense account. The trip he took while I was in the hospital undergoing a stress test. A gasp finally went through the room. The investors were pulling out their phones. I could see the screens lighting up as they checked their calendars, cross-referencing dates. Realizing the depth of the deception, Caroline, who had been standing frozen near the buffet, suddenly mobilized. She rushed toward me, her face twisted in a rich of fury and panic. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh. Are you crazy? She hissed, her voice trembling with rage. You are destroying this family. Turn it off, Tesser. You are humiliating us. I looked down at her hand on my arm. I did not pull away. I just looked at her. I am not destroying anything, Caroline, I said, my voice calm, projecting clearly enough for the people around us to hear. I am just showing the home movies. I did not script the scene. I did not direct the actors. I am just a projectionist. You ungrateful little Caroline started raising her hand as if to slap me. I would not, I said, catching her wrist in midair. Unless you want the next slide to be the bank transfers from Richard's medical trust to your personal shopping account. Caroline went pale. She snatched her hand back and stumbled away from me, looking at Logan with horror. Logan was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looked at the investors, who were now huddled in tight groups, whispering furiously. He looked at Sloane, who was backing away toward the exit, shielding her face with her portfolio. He realized he was losing the room. He realized the growth story was dead. He turned to me. He walked toward me, stepping over the spilled champagne on the rug. He stopped 3 feet away. His face was a mask of desperation and sweat. The charm was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was a cornered animal. "Tesser," he said. His voice was low, shaking. "Tesser, stop this, please." I looked at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to love. He looked small. "Why?" I asked. "Is it not the vibe you wanted?" "We can fix this," he pleaded, his eyes darting around the room, seeing the judgment on every face. "We can talk about this upstairs. Just turn off the screen." "There is nothing to talk about, Logan," I said. "The presentation is self-explanatory." He took a step closer, lowering his voice to a frantic whisper. "What do you want?" he hissed. "Is this about the prenup? Is this about the house? I will give you whatever you want. You want money? I will write you a check right now. I will pay you double whatever the settlement would be. Just kill the fee before the stock price tanks." I stared at him, even now, standing in the wreckage of his own morality. He thought he could buy me. He thought I was a transaction. "You cannot afford me, Logan," I said. "And you definitely cannot afford what is coming next." I looked past him to the screen. The video had ended. The screen was black for a moment. Then the final slide appeared. It was not a photo. It was a document. It was a scanned copy of the power of attorney modification he had forged, side by side with the withdrawal slip for the cryptocurrency investment made from Richard's medical fund. The text overlay read, "Total unauthorized withdrawals, $450,000. The gasp from the room was audible this time. Adultery was a scandal. Embezzlement was a crime. Mr. Henderson, the board member who had patted my arm earlier, stepped forward. His face was purple with rage. "Logan," Henderson boomed. "Is that real?" Logan spun around, his hands up in a surrender motion. "It is a misunderstanding. It is an investment strategy. Dad knew about it. Dad signed off on it." Laughter did I. Richard's voice came over the speakers again. Richard stepped down from the stage. He walked slowly, deliberately toward his son. He stopped in the center of the room. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea. "I do not recall authorizing a crypto transfer, Logan," Richard said. "And I certainly do not recall authorizing you to check into the Aspiranza Resort with a woman signing my daughter-in-law's name." Logan looked at his father. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. He realized finally that this was not a prank. It was not a fight. It was an eviction. "Tesser," he said again, his voice cracking, tears of frustration welling in his eyes. "Baby, please. We are a team. Don't do this." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out my wedding ring. The gold band felt cold and heavy. I took his hand. His palm was clammy. I placed the ring in the center of his hand and closed his fingers over it. "We were never a team, Logan," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "I was just the logo you used to sell a defective product." I stepped back. "Happy birthday, Richard," I said, and then I turned my back on him. The image on the screen burned bright and harsh, illuminating the faces of the people who had enabled him, the people who had ignored me, and the man who had thought he could erase me. The party was over. The trial had begun. The silence that followed the video was heavier than any scream. The image of the forged bank document faded from the screen, leaving the room bathed in the harsh, unforgiving light of the crystal chandeliers. The party was dead. The autopsy had begun. Richard took a step forward. He did not lean on his cane. In fact, he let it drop to the floor with a loud clatter that made Caroline jump. He stood straight, his shoulders squared, looking not like the frail invalid of the last 6 months, but like the titan of industry who had built this town. "I think," Richard said, his voice projecting to the back of the room without a microphone, "that it is time I gave my son the birthday gift he truly deserves." Logan looked at his father, sweat beating on his forehead. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, to charm his way out of the noose. But Richard raised a hand. It was a command. "Silence." "Marjorie," Richard said, "if you please." Marjorie Blake stepped into the center of the room. She opened the thick leather file she had been holding. She did not look like a party guest anymore. She looked like an executioner. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marjorie announced, her voice crisp. "As of 4:00 this afternoon, the governance structure of Harbaughstone Equity Group has been fundamentally altered." She held up a document, the blue ink of the signature still looking fresh. "Mr. Richard Mercer has invoked the emergency restructuring clause in the company bylaws." Marjorie read, "Effective immediately. Logan Mercer is removed from all executive functions. He is stripped of his voting rights on the board. He is removed from the payroll." A gasp rippled through the room. The investors looked at each other, their eyes wide. They had come here to crown a king, and they were watching a deposition instead. Furthermore, Marjorie continued, turning the page with a sharp snap, "All power of attorney privileges previously granted to Logan Mercer have been revoked due to documented breach of fiduciary duty and embezzlement. Any signature made by Logan Mercer on behalf of Richard Mercer from this moment forward is void." Logan's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of gray and purple. "This is insane," he stammered, looking at the board members. "You cannot do this. The company needs me. I am the face of the brand." "Not anymore," Marjorie said. "The assets of the Mercer estate, including the controlling interest in the company, have been transferred into a new protective trust." She paused, looking directly at me. "The sole trustee," Marjorie announced, "appointed to oversee the distribution of funds and the management of the family assets is Ms. Tessa Caldwell." The room turned to look at me. I stood there, my back straight, my expression unreadable. I saw the shock in their eyes. They had expected me to be the victim. They had expected me to take a payoff and disappear. They did not expect me to be the boss. "Tesser," Logan choked out the word. He looked at me as if I had raised a second head. You are the trustee. You control the money. I control the ethics." "Logan," I said calmly, "something you seem to lack." And Marjorie added, delivering the final blow, "Part of Ms. Caldwell's mandate is to oversee the new Mercer Initiative, a charitable foundation dedicated to protecting the elderly from financial abuse by family members." The irony hung in the air, thick and suffocating. "This is a setup," Logan screamed. He pointed a shaking finger at Richard. "Look at him. He is not in his right mind. He is confused. Tessa manipulated him. She is taking advantage of a sick old man." "I object to that characterization," a calm voice said from the side. Dr. Evans stepped forward. He was holding the affidavit he had signed that morning. "I performed a comprehensive cognitive evaluation on Richard Mercer at 10:00 this morning." Dr. Evans told the room he scored a perfect 30 out of 30. "He is fully oriented. He is lucid. And he is significantly sharper than anyone else in this room. Seems to be. And I can testify to the neglect." A voice piped up from the back. It was Mara, the neighbor. She marched forward, clutching her purse. "I watched this boy leave his father alone in the dark while he went out to work late. I watched him force Richard to take taxis to the hospital. If anyone is abusing Richard, it is the man standing right there in the tuxedo. And the money," another voice added. Caleb, the young accountant Logan had fired, stepped out from behind a potted palm where he had been standing. He looked nervous, but he looked determined. "I saw the transfers. I saw the fake invoices for Heart Solutions. Logan told me to cook the books or lose my job." The evidence was piling up. It was a landslide. There was nowhere left for Logan to run. Mr. Anderson, the senior board member, cleared his throat. He walked over to Logan. He did not look angry anymore. He looked disappointed. He looked done. "Logan," Henderson said, his voice heavy with finality, "we gave you every opportunity. We looked the other way on the expenses because we thought you were driving growth. But this stealing from your father's medical fund, lying to the shareholders." Henderson shook his head. "Don't bother coming in on Monday. Security will box up your personal effects. You do not have a seat in our conference room anymore." Logan looked around the room. He looked for an ally. He searched for anyone who would buy his charm, but the faces staring back at him were cold. The mask had slipped and everyone could see the rot underneath. Caroline let out a sob. She grabbed Richard's arm. "Richard, please. You cannot do this to him. He is your son. And what about the house? This is our home. You cannot just kick us out onto the street." Richard looked at his wife. There was no hate in his eyes, only a deep, weary sadness. "The house is now an asset of the trust," Richard said gently. "It belongs to the foundation. I have made arrangements for you to stay here for 90 days as tenants. After that, if you wish to remain, you will have to negotiate a lease with the trustee." He pointed at me. Caroline stared at me with horror. She realized that the daughter-in-law she had dismissed, the woman she had told to stop making drama, now held the keys to the front door. Logan turned to me. He saw the walls closing in. He saw the money vanishing. He saw his reputation burning to ash. He did the only thing he knew how to do. He tried to sell me a fantasy. He walked over to me, ignoring the stars of the crowd. He lowered his voice, trying to create an intimacy that no longer existed. "Tesser," he pleaded, his eyes wet with tears that might have even been real. "Baby, listen to me. I messed up. Okay, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We are a team, you and me against the world, right? Remember our vows." For better or worse, he reached for my hand. "Don't do this to me in front of them. Don't humiliate me like this. We can work it out. I will fire Sloan. I will do whatever you want. Just tell them to stop. Tell Dad to stop." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat dripping down his temple. I looked at the panic in his eyes. I realized he did not love me. He did not even hate me. He just needed me. I was a life raft and he was drowning. I took a step back, putting space between us. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the plain gold band I had worn for 5 years. "We were never a team," Logan, I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. "Teams have trust. Teams have respect. You did not want a partner. You wanted a prop." I placed the ring on the small cocktail table next to me. It made a sharp clink against the glass. "You used me," I said loud enough for Sloan to hear as she huddled near the exit. "You used my designs to build your brand. You used my credit to hide your debt. You used my name to check into a hotel with your mistress. I was just a new logo you slapped on your life to increase the valuation." Logan stared at the ring. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. "But you forgot one thing about business, Logan," I said. "You have to protect your core assets." I picked up my coat from the chair where I had left it. "You think I am doing this for the money?" I asked. "You think I will stay quiet if you write me a check? You are wrong. I can earn my own money. I built a business from nothing once and I will do it again. But you," I looked him up and down, looking at the expensive suit that now looked like a costume. "You cannot earn back integrity." I said. "You are bankrupt in the only currency that matters." I turned to Richard. He was watching me with a look of profound pride. He nodded, a silent salute, from one survivor to another. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said softly. "This is my gift to you, the truth." I did not wait for a response. I turned and walked toward the double doors. The crowd parted from me instantly. They did not look at me with pity anymore. They looked at me with fear and respect. I walked past Caroline, who was weeping into a napkin. I walked past Sloan, who refused to meet my eyes. I walked out into the cool night air. The gravel crunched under my heels. Behind me, the house was silent. The party was over. The balloons were still floating. The banner still said, "Cheers to 60 years." But the facade had crumbled. I did not look back. I did not wonder if Logan was crying. I did not wonder if they were eating the cake. I opened the door of my rental car and tossed my bag onto the passenger seat. I started the engine. As I drove down the winding driveway, leaving the Mercer estate behind in the rear-view mirror, I felt a lightness in my chest I had not felt in years. I was driving away from a fortune, but I was driving toward myself, and that was the only destination that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed watching Logan get exactly what he deserved, please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to know where my listeners are in the world. Make sure to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories for more satisfying dramas. Like this video and smash that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.